My name is Maya Chen, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I believed that love had conditions, that acceptance came with a price tag, and that family meant living up to impossible expectations. This is the story of how I learned otherwise, though the lesson came wrapped in pain, distance, and eventually an unexpected Mercedes-Benz. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in Sacramento, the middle child between my older brother David and younger sister Sophie. My father, Robert Chen, worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm. My mother, Patricia, taught elementary school for nearly 3 decades. They were good people, hard-working people, the kind who believed in traditional values and clear pathways to success. David became a lawyer. Sophie married a dentist. And me? I became the family disappointment. It wasn't that I failed at life. I just chose a different road. After college, I went into graphic design, freelancing from a tiny apartment while my parents wondered aloud when I'd get a real job. I dated Jake Morrison, a kind-hearted carpenter who built custom furniture with his own hands. My parents wondered aloud when I'd find someone with better prospects. The wondering never stopped. It became the background music of every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every phone call. When Jake proposed to me on a simple beach at sunset, with a ring he'd saved for months to buy, I cried tears of pure joy. When I told my parents, my mother's first question was whether we'd set a date. Her second was whether Jake had considered going back to school for a business degree. Planning the wedding became a lonely endeavor. I'd call my mother to share ideas, only to hear lukewarm responses. I'd invite my parents to meet with a florist or taste wedding cakes, but they always seemed too busy. David was wrapped up in a major case. Sophie was dealing with her toddler's sleep regression. Everyone had reasons, but I told myself it would be different on the actual day. They'd see Jake and me together, surrounded by friends who'd become family, and they'd understand. They'd feel the love in that small garden venue we'd worked so hard to afford, and everything would change. The wedding was set for a Saturday in late September. The weather forecast promised sunshine. I'd found a simple cream dress at a vintage shop that made me feel beautiful. Jake's grandmother had offered her pearl earrings, worn at her own wedding 60 years earlier. We'd strung lights through the trees ourselves, Jake standing on a ladder while I directed from below, both of us laughing. 1 week before the wedding, I called my parents to confirm details. My father answered. His voice sounded distant, distracted. "Are you both still planning to come early to help set up?" I asked. There was a pause, long enough that I felt my stomach tighten. "Maya, your mother and I have been talking," he said. "We're not sure this wedding is a good idea. You're rushing into this. Jake is a nice enough young man, but you're both so young, so unsettled. Maybe you should wait a few years, get more established." "I'm 32, Dad. Jake is 34, we're not kids." Another pause. "We think you should reconsider. We're not comfortable supporting this decision right now." The words landed like stones. Supporting this decision. As if my marriage was a business venture they were declining to invest in. "So you're not coming," I said quietly. "We think it's best if we step back and let you think things through. If you decide to postpone, we'll be here to help you plan something more appropriate." I don't remember what I said next. I think I just hung up. When I told Jake, he held me while I cried. He didn't say anything bad about my parents, he just stroked my hair and promised that we'd build our own family, our own traditions, our own definition of love. The wedding day arrived with that promised sunshine. Jake's family filled the seats on his side. My friends filled most of the seats on mine. The space where my parents should have sat remained empty, 2 chairs draped in ribbon like memorials. I walked myself down the aisle. Jake's eyes filled with tears when he saw me. The ceremony was beautiful. The reception was joyful. But throughout it all, I felt that empty space like a missing tooth, something I couldn't stop touching with my tongue, checking if it still hurt. It did. After the wedding, I sent my parents a photo. Just one. Jake and me cutting the cake, both of us laughing at some joke his uncle had made. I didn't include a message. I didn't know what to say. They didn't respond. Weeks became months. I threw myself into my work with a fierceness I hadn't known I possessed. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was the need to prove something. Maybe I just needed to focus on something I could control. Jake and I settled into married life in our small rental. He built us a dining table from reclaimed oak. I designed logos for small businesses, my client list slowly growing. We were happy, genuinely happy, in a way that had nothing to do with money or status or parental approval. But the silence from my parents hollowed out a space inside me. I'd see other daughters posting brunch photos with their mothers, and I'd have to put my phone down. Holidays became minefields of emotion. Christmas morning, I woke up hoping for a call that never came. On my birthday, there was a card in the mail, store-bought, signed by both parents with no personal message. It felt worse than nothing. David called occasionally, usually with some variation of the same speech. You know how they are, Maya. They think they're protecting you. They'll come around eventually. Just give them time. But Sophie was more honest. Mom talks about you at dinner sometimes. She saw a graphic design piece in a magazine and wondered if you'd done it. But then Dad changes the subject, and everyone pretends the conversation never happened. It was Sophie who told me about the social media incident. 2 years after my wedding, I landed my biggest client yet, a tech startup that needed complete brand development. The project took 6 months and paid more than I'd made in the previous year. When they launched, they tagged me in their Instagram post, thanking me by name. I didn't think much of it. But that startup's product went semi-viral. Their Instagram post got thousands of likes. And apparently someone my parents knew saw it and mentioned it at their book club. Sophie called me the next day, her voice careful. Mom has been asking about you. She wants to know what you're working on these days. After 2 years of silence, that's what prompts contact? Professional curiosity? Sophie sighed. I know. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing. I think she's proud but doesn't know how to say it. Pride isn't something you get to pick and choose. You don't get to ignore someone's wedding and then claim pride when they succeed despite you. But even as I said it, I felt that old hunger. Some part of me, the child I'd been, still wanted their approval, still wanted them to see me. I didn't call them. I told myself I was done seeking validation from people who'd made their priorities clear. Jake agreed, though I could see the concern in his eyes when I'd fall into these quiet, brooding moods. Work continued to grow. I hired an assistant, we moved into a bigger apartment. Jake's furniture business expanded, and he rented a proper workshop. We were building something real, something solid, something that was entirely ours. Then came the Mercedes. Dee explained that I've never been a car person. I drove a practical sedan that got me from point A to point B without fuss. But one of my clients owned a luxury car dealership, and after I'd redesigned his entire brand identity, he called me with an unusual proposition. Maya, I want to do something for you. You've transformed my business. I'm seeing results I never imagined. Let me give you a car. I laughed. That's incredibly generous, but I can't accept a car. Not give as in free. Give as in an extraordinary deal on something you'll love driving. Come to the dealership. Just look, no pressure. Jake encouraged me to go. You've worked so hard. You deserve to treat yourself. The dealership was impressive, all glass and chrome and vehicles that cost more than I'd made in my first 5 years of freelancing. I felt out of place immediately. But then I saw it. A silver Mercedes-Benz E-Class, elegant and understated. The salesman, a friendly man named Tom, explained its features while I half listened, running my hand along the hood.
Want to test drive it, he asked.
I did. Jake came with me, and we drove through Sacramento with the sunroof open, both of us grinning like teenagers. The car handled like a dream. It felt like success made tangible, like proof that we'd built something worthwhile. When Tom gave me the price, reduced significantly because of the owner's gratitude, I looked at Jake. It's your decision, he said, but I think you should do it. You've earned this. I bought the car. Driving it home felt surreal. I kept checking the mirrors, half convinced I was in the wrong vehicle. But no, this was mine. Purchased with money I'd earned, doing work I loved. I posted a photo on Instagram that evening. Nothing boastful, just a simple shot of the car in our driveway with the caption, "Grateful for hard work and new chapters." I tagged Jake, thanking him for always believing in me. I didn't think about my parents seeing it. I'd long since stopped considering them part of my social media audience. But my Instagram was public. Apparently my mother had been checking it occasionally, though she never liked or commented. 2 days after I posted the photo, my phone rang. The caller ID said, "Mom." I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hello, Maya." "It's your mother." As if I didn't know, "I saw your post. That's quite a car." Her voice was careful, measured, the tone she used when she was trying to sound casual, about something that wasn't casual at all. "Thank you. It's a gift to myself for some recent work success. You must be doing very well. I didn't realize graphic design could be so lucrative." Something sharp twisted in my chest. It can be when you work hard and build a solid reputation. There was a pause. Your father and I were talking. We thought it might be nice to have a family dinner. It's been too long since we've all been together. Maybe this weekend? We could do that Italian place you always liked. I closed my eyes. After more than 2 years of silence, after missing my wedding, after those carefully empty birthday cards, this was how they reached out. Not with an apology, not with acknowledgement of the hurt they'd caused, but with a dinner invitation prompted by a Mercedes. "Why now?" I asked quietly. "What do you mean? You haven't spoken to me in over 2 years. You didn't come to my wedding. You've barely acknowledged my existence. But I post a photo of a nice car, and suddenly you want dinner? Maya, don't be dramatic. We've just been busy. You know how life gets dramatic." The word hit like a slap. "I got married, Mom. I sent you a photo from my wedding. You didn't even respond. We were giving you space to think. For 2 years? That's not space. That's abandonment." Her voice sharpened. "That's not fair. You made your choice. You ride Jake despite our concerns. We had to respect that boundary. My choice to marry someone I love. And you respected that by pretending I didn't exist." Another pause, longer this time. "Can we please just have dinner and talk about this in person?" I felt something inside me that had been wound tight for years begin to unravel. All the hurt, all the loneliness, all the times I'd imagined them calling to apologize, to say they'd been wrong, to ask for forgiveness. No. I don't want to have dinner. I don't want to pretend everything is fine because I finally have something you deem worthy of your attention. "Maya, you're being childish. I'm being honest. You made it clear that I only mattered to you if I lived up to certain standards. Well, I've built a good life without those standards. I have a husband who loves me. I have work that fulfills me. I have friends who showed up when it mattered. I don't need your approval anymore." I could hear her breathing, quick and shallow. "You were my daughter, then you should have acted like I was your daughter when it mattered. You should have come to my wedding. You should have called on my birthday and actually talked to me. You should have cared about my life, not just the parts that look good to your friends. I think you need to calm down and think about what you're saying. I've had 2 years to think, Mom. I'm done. If you want to be part of my life, it starts with an apology. A real one. Not a dinner invitation. Not small talk about my car. An acknowledgement of the hurt you caused and a genuine desire to do better. Silence. I'm going to go now. If you and Dad decide you're ready to have that conversation, you know how to reach me. Until then, I need to protect my peace." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking. Jake found me sitting on the kitchen floor, phone clutched in my hand, tears streamy down my face. He sat beside me, saying nothing, just being present. I told him no, I whispered. Good. It doesn't feel good. It feels terrible. He put his arm around me. That's because you're a good person who loves your parents despite how they've treated you. But you did the right thing. You stood up for yourself. Over the next few days, I waited for follow-up calls that never came. David texted to say Mom was upset, that I'd been harsh. Sophie called to say she understood but hoped everyone could work things out eventually. I felt their absence like a physical weight, but I also felt something new, relief. I'd spent so long seeking their approval, bending myself into shapes they might accept, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist as myself. Jake and I started planning a trip to Japan, something we'd always talked about. I took on new clients. We hosted dinner parties in our small apartment, filling it with laughter and good food and people who genuinely cared about us. Months passed. Then a year. I saw my parents occasionally at family events I couldn't avoid, David's birthday dinner or Sophie's baby shower. We were polite, distant, like acquaintances forced to share space. Then my father had a heart attack. Sophie called me from the hospital, her voice panicked. He's stable, but Maya, you should come. I drove to the hospital in my Mercedes, the car that had inadvertently triggered everything. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father looked small in the hospital bed, pale and tired in a way I'd never seen. My mother sat beside him, her eyes red. When she saw me, she stood. Maya, thank you for coming. Of course I came. He's my father. We stood there awkwardly until she gestured to the hallway. Can we talk? Outside the room, away from the beeping machines and sanitized smell, my mother faced me. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile. When I saw your father lying there, she started, her voice shaking. All I could think about was time. How we never know how much we have. How stupid we've been. I waited, unsure what to say. You were right, about everything. We didn't come to your wedding because we were stubborn and proud and convinced we knew what was best for you. We thought you'd thank us later, that you'd realize we were protecting you. She wiped her eyes. But you didn't need protecting. You needed support. You needed your parents to love you regardless of who you married or what career you chose. And we failed you. The apology I'd imagined so many times was finally happening, but it felt different than I'd expected. Less satisfying, more painful. The car thing, she continued, that was a wake-up call. I saw it and realized you'd succeeded without us. You'd built this life, this career, and we hadn't been there for any of it. I wanted to reach out, but I didn't know how to bridge that gap. You could have started with, I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry, Maya. I'm so deeply sorry for missing your wedding. For the silence. For making you feel like our love had conditions. You deserved better. I felt tears building behind my eyes. I wanted you there, Mom. On my wedding day, I kept looking at those empty chairs and wondering what I'd done wrong. You did nothing wrong. This was entirely on us. Your father and I let our expectations blind us to what actually mattered. And I don't know if we can fix what we broke, but I want to try. We stood in that hospital hallway, years of hurt between us, and I made a decision. It's going to take time. I can't just pretend the last few years didn't happen. I understand. But I'm willing to try if you are. Real trying. Not just showing up for big moments, but actually being present. Learning about my life. Getting to know Jake as a person, not just someone who didn't meet your standa. RDS. She nodded. Tears flowing freely now. Anything. Whatever you need. My father's recovery took weeks. I visited the hospital regularly, sometimes with Jake, sometimes alone. Slowly, carefully, my parents and I began to rebuild something. It wasn't what we'd had before, it was more honest, more real. They came to dinner at our apartment, and my father spent an hour in Jake's workshop, genuinely interested in the furniture-making process. My mother asked about my work, really asked, wanting to understand rather than judge. It wasn't perfect. There were awkward moments, conversations that hit old wounds. But we kept trying. One evening, months after my father's heart attack, we all gathered at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. David was there with his wife, Sophie with her husband and kids, and me with Jake. My mother had made my favorite pot roast, the one she used to make for special occasions when I was young. As we sat around the table, passing dishes and sharing stories, I felt something shift. This is what I'd wanted, not the approval, not the validation of success. Just this, family, flawed and human, choosing each other despite everything. After dinner, my father asked to speak with me privately. We went out to the backyard, where he'd hung a new porch swing. "I bought this thinking of you," he said. "You used to love swings as a kid. You'd pump your legs and swear you were going to touch the sky. I remember." We sat together, gently swinging. "I've been thinking about that Mercedes of yours." I tensed, unsure where this was going. "I was so stupid," he continued. "Seeing that car, it was like a slap in the face, proof that you'd done well without us. It stung because I'd convinced myself you needed our guidance, our approval. But you didn't. You never did, Dad." "No, let me finish. You built something beautiful, Maya. Your career, your marriage, your whole life, it's impressive. But more than that, it's authentic. You didn't compromise who you were to make us happy. I wish I'd learned that lesson earlier, but I'm grateful I learned it at all." I leaned against his shoulder the way I used to as a child. We've all made mistakes. Mine were bigger. But I'm going to spend however much time I have left making up for them. Not because I want something from you, but because you deserve a father who shows up. You're showing up now. That counts. We swung in silence, watching the sun set through the trees. The months that followed weren't always easy. Healing rarely is. There were difficult conversations about boundaries, about respect, about learning to love people as they are rather than as we wish they'd be. My parents apologized to Jake directly, acknowledging how they'd judged him unfairly. He accepted with grace, though I knew the hurt went deep. We started new traditions, monthly dinners where everyone shared something they were grateful for, holiday gatherings that focused on presence rather than presents. My mother even took a graphic design class at the community college to better understand my work. On our 5th wedding anniversary, Jake and I decided to renew our vows. Just a simple ceremony in our backyard with close family and friends. When I asked my father if he'd walk me down the aisle this time, he cried. The day was perfect. Clear skies, gentle breeze, love everywhere I looked. My father walked me to Jake, his hand steady on my arm. My mother sat in the front row, tissues already in hand. When the officiant asked who gives this woman, my father's voice was strong and clear. Her mother and I do, with all our love and support, given freely and without condition. It was what I'd needed to hear 5 years earlier. But hearing it now, after everything we'd been through, meant even more after the ceremony as we celebrated with cake and champagne. My mother pulled me aside. "Thank you for giving us another chance. Not every daughter would be so gracious. I learned from you that family means showing up, even when it's hard. You taught me that through your absence, and now through your presence." She smiled, sad and grateful. "I wish we'd taught you sooner that you were always enough, exactly as you were, but I learned it anyway. Maybe that's the lesson I needed to learn on my own." Later, as the party wound down and guests drifted home, I sat on our porch with Jake, watching the stars come out. "Do you regret buying the Mercedes?" he asked. Considering everything it triggered, I thought about it, about that chain of events. The car, the call, the confrontation, the long road to reconciliation. No, I don't think things would have changed otherwise. Sometimes you need a catalyst, something big enough to force everyone to look at what they've been avoiding. He took my hand. "I'm proud of you, you know, for standing up for yourself, for setting boundaries, for being willing to forgive without forgetting. I'm proud of us. We built something good here, something real, and we did it without anyone's permission." I laughed. "That's the best part. The Mercedes is still in our driveway. I drive it to client meetings, to family dinners, to the grocery store on Tuesday afternoons. It's just a car, metal and engineering and wheels. But it reminds me of something important, that my worth isn't determined by other people's approval, that success is measured in authenticity rather than acceptance, and that sometimes the roads we travel alone teach us the most valuable lessons. My relationship with my parents isn't what it was before the rift. It's better, more honest, built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than unspoken expectations. Last month, my father asked about my work, really asked, wanting to understand. The creative process. My mother has coffee with me every other Wednesday, just the two of us, talking about everything and nothing. They've learned Jake's favorite foods and remember his work deadlines. They show up. That's all I ever wanted. Not perfection. Just presence. David told me recently that I'd been brave, that my confrontation with our parents had freed him to have his own difficult conversations with them about expectations and pressure. Sophie said she'd learned from watching me set boundaries, that it had helped her advocate for herself in her own marriage. We're all learning, growing, becoming more ourselves. Sometimes people ask me if I'd do anything differently, if I'd have tried harder to include my parents before the wedding, been more patient, waited longer. I tell them no. Every step of that painful journey taught me something essential about love, worth, and forgiveness. I learned that you can't make people value you, but you can value yourself enough to walk away when they don't. And I learned that sometimes people do change, that healing is possible if everyone is willing to do the work. The empty chairs at my wedding will always be a scar I carry. But scars are proof of healing, evidence that we survived something difficult and came through changed. Now, when I drive that Mercedes, I don't think about the conflict it sparked. I think about the woman who bought it, the one who'd worked hard enough and believed in herself enough to claim her success. I think about how far I've come from that girl who thought she needed her parents' approval to be worthy. I am worthy. I always was. The car didn't make me worthy. The career success didn't make me worthy. I was born worthy, just like we all are. Some of us just take longer to learn it. As I write this, I'm sitting at the dining table Jake built, in the home we've made together. Tomorrow we're having Sunday dinner at my parents' house. My father is grilling. My mother is making her pot roast. David and Sophie will be there with their families. Jake is bringing his grandmother's famous apple pie. It's ordinary, it's beautiful. It's everything I used to dream about during those long, lonely years of silence. I've learned that kindness isn't weakness, that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and that family can break and heal and be stronger for it. I've learned that material success matters far less than emotional honesty, and that the only approval that truly counts is the one we give ourselves. Most importantly, I've learned that we're all worthy of love, not for what we achieve or who we marry or how much money we make, but simply because we exist. That's a lesson worth sharing. That's a truth worth knowing. And it took a Mercedes, a missed wedding, and a whole lot of heartache for me to finally understand it, but I understand it now. And I'll spend the rest of my life living it. If this story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd like, share, and subscribe. Leave a comment below sharing your own experiences with family, forgiveness, or finding your way back to each other after difficult times. Your stories matter, and I'd love to hear them.